And the issue is gun rights. And you knew that after this Orlando, these things always happen because I really believe that people who are not necessarily Second Amendment people, but say, listen, I support a person's right to have a gun. Who cares? They want to have a gun. Let them have a gun. The good people are the ones, not the ones that are doing bad things with guns. And if you pass all these laws, you're just going to restrict the people who are law-abiding citizens, and certainly the criminals aren't going to follow suit. So the two issues they were going after last night and overnight are they want to see a ban on those that are on the no-fly list. So it implies that they're talking about terrorists. And the other issue is background checks on gun sales at gun shows and internet. Here's some audio from the Democrats last night as part of their protest in Washington.
Without objection, 5-minute voting will continue. Without objection, order. Without objection, 5-minute voting will continue. The unfinished business is on the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. LaHood, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5312 unamended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5312, a bill to amend the High Performance Computing Act of 1991 to authorize activities for support of networking and information technology research and for other purposes.
Order. In the background, it kind of sounds like you're at a curling match, doesn't it? A little bit. They're going down the ice and doing the thing. Hey! Somebody writes in, would it be discriminatory, a discriminatory law if you focus gun violence by folks who had gang ties? We fortunately have more people killed in Chicago, or unfortunately more people killed in Chicago in the last 2 weeks than what happened in Orlando. And that is really true. The problem I think you have with this is you're taking guns, you're taking a constitutional right away from someone. If they're U.S. citizens, you're taking a constitutional right away from someone without any due process. And so you're placing them on this list. And who gets on the list? I guess that makes me feel very uncomfortable. But you want to pipe in 7360186. Why should these not be passed? Why shouldn't there be background checks? And I'm pretty sure here there are background checks in New York, but if you go to a gun show in South Carolina or you buy a gun off the internet, there aren't background checks. Why not? Wouldn't we catch people who are maybe like what happened in Orlando? Probably not, but maybe somebody who has issues that are mental issues. Could we possibly snag them before they're able to pick up a gun? What do you think? 7360186. Chuck always has an opinion in Ilion on this topic. Good morning, Chuck. What do you think?
Bill, I'll just be right to the point. Who in their right mind thinks that a criminal, no matter what kind of criminal he is going to say, geez, I better not use a gun in the commission of my crime, whatever that might be, because I'm going to get in trouble because I used a gun.
Yeah.
Gun laws do nothing but restrict law-abiding citizens the ability to defend themselves. And let me just say this, I've never owned a gun in my life. I don't own one now, but I am firmly behind the Second Amendment.
Hey, you know, if you wanted, you could probably kill somebody with those stilts you used to walk on.
If I fell on them, I probably
you could probably kill them.
But we don't like to talk about that kind of stuff. Though.
Listen, this is Chuck, who you might have seen for years in the Boilermaker and every public event in the area on stilts. And Chuck, I do have to think the only people that might, you know, these background checks and that sort of thing, it might catch somebody trying to slip through the cracks who has a mental illness. Because they're not going to know enough to say, and maybe they don't think straight, and they're not going to know enough to say, hey, I'm going to avoid this. I'm going to get my gun illegally. And you could see someone with mental illness just going through the process, thinking they're going to get a gun, and it gets restricted. But what terrorist, if he knows that they're going to be checking you, if he knows what terrorist is going to say, well, okay, I'm never going to get a gun. They're going to get that gun illegally, right?
Yeah, it's just a question of law-abiding citizens versus criminals. And criminals always find a way to usurp the law. And I'm not opposed to, background checks and so on and so forth to make sure people do stuff legally.
Well, that was my next question.
I believe that should be up to the, up to the states.
Yeah.
to determine how they want to handle it.
The problem is if New York has background checks and South Carolina doesn't, or Pennsylvania doesn't,
I mean,
it's going to. I do wonder. I mean, we keep talking about, and even gun rights, even those of us that are Second Amendment people talk about, we do need to worry about the mentally ill and the mentally deranged getting a hold of guns. And the only way you could do that is with some sort of a background check.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, I don't have like I said, if each individual state wants to regulate how they sell and the sale of guns, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And just like you said, keep the guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. That should be pretty easy with the technology you have today, but apparently it's only as good as the people that are doing it or the restrictions that are put on the people that are doing the background checks.
All right, Chuck. I appreciate the input. Thanks, man.
So,
and the problem with that becomes who gets to have the wonderful classification of being mentally disturbed? Who is it the guy that was yelling at somebody at work and he got fired for his temper? Is he now somebody that's maybe mentally unstable? Is it somebody who might be targeted by a member of their community that might be in power and wants to, probably illegally or unfairly try to label them as someone who is not stable? Is it something that comes out of a family court case? I mean, where do we draw the line to figure out who is unstable mentally and who isn't? That becomes a whole different problem.
I do think the federal government really has a responsibility and a role here in determining what the gun laws are. It's the Second Amendment. It's not a state issue, in my opinion. And as you pointed out, if I can't buy a certain gun in New York, what stops me from going to Pennsylvania, New Jersey?
Here's Jack. What do you think in Utica, Jack?
I got a question.
Yeah, I have an answer, I hope.
I don't know. You hear him talking about, well, we should ban the AR-15.
Well, that's what the left really wanted, and they're complaining about this morning that the Democrats in the Senate didn't go after. There's nothing about those AR-15s or similar guns to. That's what they're all upset about today.
Well, my question is, are they going to ban the guns, the type of guns that were used on 9/11 and the Boston race?
Yeah, that those were box cutters. Yeah, I get your point, Jack. I get the point.
But there's not going to be any exact answer, and nobody's going to have all the answers because we can't legislate morality. But from what I understand, the best point I heard was what you do is you make somebody who uses a gun in a crime, you give them really, really harsh penalties. That'll deter some.
That's fine. That's fine. I think if you're talking about gang members or you're talking about other crimes, but again, in this case, this guy's hell-bent on killing as many people as he can, and at the end of the day, he knows he's going to. Whether if he does it himself, we're talking about.
I'm talking about the guy in Orlando. But the problem is that guy's a U.S. citizen. He was a security guard who had a weapon,
passed a background check,
had most likely a concealed permit, who passed the background check, who was investigated on charges that were deemed to be unfounded.
But what he's saying,
I don't know how the system. Could have stopped him from getting a gun.
But what he's saying is, if you toughen the penalties on if you're using a gun in a crime, in that case, that's not going to deter you. He's basically in suicide mode.
Jack, we're not going to make the world a perfect place, right?
Right.
And the morality issue, which you talk about, is key here. There is a culture right now, and it is these copycat mass crimes. It's the thing that deranged people now go to. I mean, years ago, it might have been what? Carjackings were big at one point, or you remember when it was a big deal when out in D.C. area you had these snipers that were shooting at highways, and that would pop up in other places. Well, today it's these mass shootings. You go into a soft target, you go into a public place, and you shoot up people, deranged people. No law will correct a deranged person. I don't know how we're going to do that.
And they're alleging right now that while he was participating in the shooting, that he was actually looking up information on social media about the San Bernardino shooters.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why we don't like to say their names. It's like one of the reasons why you don't like to say terrorist names, because it just gives them more coverage.
And this guy, this guy did mention ISIS as part of his inspiration. The guy was deranged. clearly was having issues with his own sexuality. We're finding out he's just a crazy person. Anybody that could walk in and kill innocent people like that has got to be crazy to begin with. Jack, I want to ask you on the states that don't require any background checks when it comes to purchasing guns at gun shows or on the internet. Is that a bad thing? I mean, how do we weed out how can we weed out the mentally deranged if we don't have some sort of a background check?
I agree with background checks. I was going to say real quick that you got to remember, Cain killed Abel with a rock. I mean, that's what the Bible teaches us. And you got to listen. I don't want every nutcase to get a gun. You know, my wife and kids are out in public. You know, your wife and kids are out in public. No, I don't. You know what I mean? I don't think you're going to hear somebody say, "Well, no background checks" or anything like that.
Well, that's what the debate. That's what the Senate is. That's what that filibuster, the Democrats, Senate members, and also some Republicans are calling for, is at least a vote on background checks, because right now it's not required in some states based on sales that are done over the internet and done at gun shows.
From what I understand, this guy worked for a division of Department of Homeland Security or something like that. My information.
Speaking of background checks, I mean, do you think that they'd have checked this guy out? And I got to tell you, would you, if you're the head of a security company and you found out that the guy who's applying for the job was suspended from school because he had sympathy and was basically shouting out that he was good with the with those that flew those planes into the Twin Towers. I mean, isn't there a background check that would say, you know what, I'm not going to keep you from getting a gun, but we're not going to hire you as a security guard and give you a gun? I can't believe this guy was able to slip through the cracks.
Well, you know, another thing, what you hear about the political correctness, a lot of this is what's called public relations. Yeah. You know, we're afraid in a society on public relations. The San Bernardino neighbors, if this is true, the neighbors of the San Bernardino killers, they were afraid to say something. They saw something. They were afraid to say something because they were afraid of being called bigots. And all we kept hearing was, if you see something, say something. If you see something, say something. Here's somebody, you know what I mean? Other people say something, and you're a bigot. You're a racist. You're profiling. You're against religion. You're against race.
Well, the fact is, you can report something anonymously. And it was one neighbor that I believe came out and said that she didn't say anything. She thought that maybe she was being a bigot, and just assumed. The problem is they were building a mass arsenal in their garage at that point, and preparing to do really, really bad things. So, all right, Jack, we appreciate your opinion. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks.
Christine with an update coming up in a few minutes. Hold tight with the birthdays and all that. It's a Thursday morning. Another free money question of the day, and George Phillips, candidate for Congress, NY 2022, is coming up. His feelings on the last few days, they're through two debates right now, one that we had and one that was over at MV on the WUTR. So George Phillips coming up in a few minutes in WIBX.